Up next, you're gonna see a free episode of my show, which airs exclusively, well, at least there's the one episode we do on YouTube every weekend, but most of the time it airs on MotorTrend on demand. It's kind of just unfiltered, behind the scenes stuff with some of your favorite people from MotorTrend, which you can see over there. We talk about car stuff and other things, beard stuff, clothing stuff, all kinds of stuff. You'll see on this next episode coming up, which we hope you enjoy. If you want to see more, sign up for a free 30-day trial at motortrendondemand.com. Hey everybody, on this episode of Daily Fix, we're going to take you into the exciting world of data crunching. You often hear us talk about data crunching, VBox, GPS, performance testing, but how do we actually get the numbers out of the GPS data acquisition hardware that we have? This episode, we're going to show you. So we'll start out first with this folder I have open. This is data from the Camaro ZL1 that we tested recently that you'll see on an upcoming episode of Ignition, I believe. We tested acceleration, braking, road holding, figure eight, and we had it go around Big Willow. We have those individual files here. You see these VBO files, that's the actual file that comes out of our data acquisition hardware. It's the VBox. It sounds like a proprietary file type, but if you open it up with Notepad, they're just text. I think they're tab delineated files. But anyway, we'll start with an acceleration run. And so I'm going to open this guy up in VBox, which I think I already have running. Yep, there it is. And you see a lot of information here. You have this graph channel that I'm going to hover over my mouse with right here. You have a map, you have data, you have a report generator. Now what this is doing is it's analyzing all the data in the file, and you can tell the program which data you want to pull out of this file. And there's a lot of tools here that the software presents you with doing all this stuff. The graph channel is important. So what we have here is seconds on the, what's that, the y-axis? I never was good with math in college. And then on this axis, we have mile an hour. So when you zoom in on one of these runs, you see this spike in mile an hour. That's clearly an acceleration run with a decent braking period following that, and then a coast as our driver turned around on the drag strip. Now when you see a bunch of different acceleration runs here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and you can recognize the pattern of what a typical acceleration run looks like. Now when we want to find out how fast the car went, we have to build a test for it. Now conveniently, we have an Excel test already built, and what this is going to do when we run it is it's going to analyze all these events in the data and pull out the data we're looking for. Basically, we're telling the program, here are the qualifications, here's a window of data that we're looking for. We're looking for when the car is at 0 and when it accelerates to a quarter mile and a little bit after that, and that's all we want to see. And then we want you to read out certain intervals like 0 to 30, 0 to 40, 0 to 50, 0 to 60, and so on. I'll run that test now, and you'll see it do its thing. A lot of data appears here, and all the runs get spit out. And then as we go to the top, you can see, okay, here's the first run. Actually, that probably doesn't look like, that looks like garbage over here. This is where a little bit of data analysis comes in handy. You have to be able to recognize what's a run and what's not. So as we get here to 6, that looks like the real deal. Come on. Sometimes these computers are a little funky. So here we see, this might have been the first actual run. It's tough to know without talking to the driver who drove. But you see 0 to 60 and 422, and then as we go down, the quarter mile should be here as well. Is that not programmed in here? I think this test might be calibrated than the one I typically use. Probably should have prepared a little bit more. But 424 to 60, as we go down to 405 to 60, you can see the numbers improving the more runs that the driver has. He's getting faster and faster as the runs go on, 408 to 60, 420 to 60, and then you can see the 0 to 100 mile an hour numbers and so on and therefore. Basically what you do is when you run this test, you look for the fastest run, export that run, and we actually have a calculation sheet that we dump that into that does a SAE's power multiplication to correct the acceleration for whether that's temperature, barometric pressure, and humidity. And we do that to standardized testing across all different venues that we test at. And that's pretty simple. We do the same thing for braking. If this has brake runs in it, let's find out. This does not have brake runs, and it looks like it's just acceleration runs, so we'll kind of ignore that for now. As we go back to the files, we'll open up the figure 8, and you guys can see what the figure 8 looks like in VBox. When we're looking at handling, this map becomes a little bit more important. I'll expand this. You can see this is a top view drawing of our figure 8, and it's a top view drawing because it's a GPS signal. So this is essentially what in a sense, the satellites see, or the data we log from the satellites about where the position of the vehicle is as it's going around the course. And so here we see the path of the vehicle in the graph, and then, that's fine. In this graph here, we see the speeds of the vehicle. Now we can also add things. We can add different channels because the VBox records a lot of different stuff. We can, for example, look at the lateral acceleration. We can look at the longitudinal acceleration. We can look at the heading. We can look at the height. And quickly this becomes an enormous mess of data. So it's very important to, what are you paying attention to the most when you're looking at this data? And a lot of this stuff, at least for handling tests, is, what happens on different runs. Does the driver make an improvement, and how does that improvement manifest? Is the car overheating in some areas, or the tires overheating, or is the driver getting better? And that's where a lot of the subjective feedback comes out of the numbers. Testing is always about more than the numbers, as I try to say that as many times as possible. Now for the figure 8 test, I always say when we do these tested videos that we pull out a lap time and G numbers. Now the way we get that is we have to tell the software where the start and stop line is on this path. We've created that start stop finish line. This is F8 test. We tell it we're going to run a circuit test, and that's basically telling it, tell us how many seconds pass between the time the car starts the lap and ends the lap. We'll run that. I actually drove this car, by the way, and I should probably not reveal that until I know if the times are good or not, but hey, it's already happened. So you can see the lap times start at 23 seconds is the first fast lap, and we can verify that. Getting this graph out of the way, looking at this graph here, let's maneuver this so it's a little bit easier to see. And we can, where are you at? There we go. So we can choose the actual laps, the run numbers, by clicking on these numbers here, and that's going to highlight what that run was. And so we're going to look at the times here, 2309, 2324, 2306, 2311, 2323, 2348, and it's pretty much consistently in the low 23s. That tells me the performance is consistent. It tells me I'm not too shabby at getting that lap time good. I'm going to pat myself on the back for that, because that feels good. It's a powerful car, kind of. It's a really powerful car. So getting a fast lap time out of it was fun, but also a bit of work. And so what we can do here is we can look at the fastest lap time, isolate that, make it our best lap, and you can see, oh, here's acceleration up to the corner entry, and then here's the braking point, and then here's mid-corner, and here's acceleration, here's braking, and acceleration around the corner, all the way out. And the cool thing about this is if you watch my cursor, you can actually track the path of the vehicle as it comes out of the corner, as it follows here, and you can look at the run basically as it was recorded. It's not live in a sense. I'm just passing time by putting my finger on the cursor, and this is a neat little thing to show off. But where it really gets value is analyzing multiple runs. So if we take lap 2 and compare it, and lap 3 and compare it, you can start seeing some variations in how the car and the driver approach the corner. So for example, on this blue run, actually, the blue and red are pretty heavily overlapped, but on the green run, for whatever reason, the car stopped shorter. I stopped a little bit earlier than I should have. Now, you have to be able to know how to massage the data to make it good for comparison, let's say. So right now we have seconds on the bottom. If we change that to, it's an x-axis, of course it's the x-axis. If we change that to feet, we're looking at mile an hour over feet. So time is kind of out of the question at this point. You're looking at right now the differences in the vehicle's speed over distance, and that is going to show you what the car is doing at the same number of feet regardless of where it was on track. So here, the green run, for example, the Camaro was going much slower. Let's get rid of a lot of this junk and go back to the main run and focus on that, and start looking at lateral acceleration. We get rid of speed. Actually, speed helps with lateral acceleration because you want to know when you're actually cornering. You can see the cornering's happening roughly here as I pass through it. That's where the car's turning right. So we're seeing a G result under lateral acceleration here. Now the way we get a cornering G is we treat this corner like a skid pad and we average. There's actually a calculation that I won't show for the sake of not complicating this more than I already have. There's a calculation that we run that averages the G result from the beginning of the corner to the end of the corner. And once we do that, we have a pretty solid, we have a G number for a 200-foot diameter skid pad, and for here it seems to be over a G. And we see a little bump here in this turn. That could have been a correction, that's me doing something at the wheel. A better example would be this corner here, which is turning left on the west side of the figure 8 course. And you can see once the car is in a corner, that G number is basically parked at 1.1 for the duration of the corner until the car begins to accelerate off. That indicates to me that going at a left turn at let's say 42-ish, 43-ish miles an hour at a 200-foot diameter skid pad, this car is capable of pulling about 1.1 G, if not maybe a little bit less than that, depending on what the average ends up being. And that tells me this is a very grippy car, and the straightaway speed, which peaks at 83.6 miles an hour in this particular run, also tells me this is a very fast car. And this is what's cool about the figure 8 is it gives you a really good indication, or really a good approximate indication of what a car is going to do at the racetrack. But if you're lucky enough like us to also go to the racetrack, we can pull up the data from the racetrack. All right, so what we have in the graph here is Big Willow. Here's the front straight, turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-ish, 8, 9, depending on how you count it. I believe it's just 8 and 9 here. Same thing happens. Randy Popes drove this car around Big Willow, and as we move the cursor, we can see the car pass the start and stop line and just sort of follow it around the course. If you have data acquisition devices at home that can pull this stuff up, VBox Tools, the software that I'm using now, this is a little bit of an aside. VBox Tools, the software that I'm using now, I believe you have to have a license to run, but VBox, or RaceLogic VBox, offers a free program, I believe it's called Circuit Tools, that you can do roughly the same stuff. I actually think it has more features than this program that we're still using. We should probably be using that program anyway, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, let's get back to what we're talking about. So what you can see here is the graph down in the bottom left of the vehicle's path, which draws the racetrack, and the graph right here shows the vehicle's speed over distance. We'll change that back to time for the sake of, that's just what we're going to do. And you can see the entire recording window happen here. Now, if you want to see how fast the car went around the racetrack, you have to drop in a start-stop line, which we have one built. We basically have these start-stop lines built for the sake of repeatability. You can drop a start-stop line anywhere around the track that you want, but if you're doing multiple tests at the same track over a long period of time, days, months, years, you want to have a consistent start-stop line because that just makes the data comparable with other days, I guess. So these green lines here in the graph are the start-stop lines, and as we run our circuit test, it's telling the software, we're telling the software again, hey, I'm curious when the car passed the start-stop line for the first time, and then the time it took it to pass the start-stop line again for the last time. And you see the results here. 126.47, 126.98 are the standout fast laps, and you can see that highlighted here. And then again, it's fun to open this as our main run. You can see Randy's lap here, and then we can open up a comparison run too and see if there are any differences jump out. And you know, this is an example of why Randy is such a great driver, because we have two laps that are almost exactly on top of each other. They're very consistent. You can see minor variations as we zoom into some of these parts here where as he's trailing off into turn 1, there's just the slightest difference in entry speed. Actually, in the first lap, he's slowing down a bit more in turn 1 than he did in the second lap. And the same thing happens in turn 2, where turn 2, this is actually kind of interesting. So as he enters turn 2 here, he's starts out a little bit slower on his first lap, but actually gains speed, accelerates just slightly harder. We're talking a difference of 1 mile an hour, as we can see here, through turn 2. And that pretty much continues all the way through the run. And you can see by doing this where some cars give up performance to other cars. Because we're looking at one car's lapping here, it kind of doesn't show us much because it's the variation is just the driver's actions. But if we want to hold on a second, I'll put in another lap from this track with a slightly different car. I'll do that now. All right, I dug through MotorTrend's testing directory and found the lapping session we have from the Mclaren 570S that we recorded in December 2015. This is not a fair comparison, and I'm not loading this in here to say one car is better than the other. I'm doing it to illustrate how you would look at the differences between the two cars around the same track. So we'll load in these laps here, and we see a best lap of 1:27.22 for the Mclaren. And then we'll load in the Camaro's lap, and we see a best lap of, oh, something broke there. Ha-ha! Let's try that again. Man, that was funky. All right, so we see a best lap of 1:26.47. So immediately we know the Camaro's faster than the Mclaren. The question is, why? The Mclaren is more, same power, lighter, maybe doesn't have the tire advantage? I don't know. So the Mclaren is the red line and the Camaro is the blue line. And the first thing that jumps out at me, actually I have to make it so they're traveling on the same path. So we'll do that right now. Make sure they're both traveling on distance. The thing that jumps out immediately right now is the McLaren's power to weight advantage. We can see that at the end of turn 1. The McLaren's doing 155 miles an hour, where the Camaro peaks at 148 miles an hour. So the McLaren has a huge horsepower or power to weight advantage, not just a horsepower advantage, the power to weight. The McLaren is more powerful, I believe, and lighter. It might be the same power, but that shows the advantage that weight has, or the absence of mass has. And as they both decelerate into turn 1, the McLaren actually stops quicker and sooner for the next corner than the Camaro does. But as Randy goes into turn 2, right here, the McLaren, let's see what's happening here. This is always kind of interesting. Maybe we should kind of ignore this stuff, the minor differences, until we get to the big differences here, which is what happens over Big Willow. Part of doing all this means you have to have an understanding of what the track is like, and Big Willow is actually a really good indicator, a really good example of this. So as we get to this part where you see, again, red is the McLaren, blue is the Camaro, the red is accelerating and then holds for a bit and then resumes acceleration, where the Camaro maintains a consistent acceleration through. Why is that happening? Well, in this part of the course, on this part of the track right here, where that delay happens, is a right turn over a hill. So as you go over the hill and keep accelerating, what looks like what happened in the McLaren is the driver either backed off, and knowing Randy, that's probably not true, or he got some wheel spin. He might have had some oversteer over that hill and had to correct it, which slowed him down. Doesn't seem to have hurt the McLaren so much, because even though he slows off, he gets back into it and still out accelerates the Camaro into turn 8. Now, speaking about turn 8, Big Willow is infamous for turns 8 and 9, which are these guys here. It's 2 turns. The first, it totals into a decreasing radius corner that you enter in at, let's see what our entry speed is for these guys. They're both entering at 140, man. Anybody who's driven Big Willows knows how crazy this whole part is. So in the McLaren, Randy's, he looks like he's applying brake for turn 8 from 146 miles an hour down to 120 miles an hour. But the Camaro, interestingly, while his speed into the corner or before his braking zone isn't as high, 141 miles an hour, he doesn't slow down as much as he did with the McLaren. And in fact, when they accelerate, because Randy likes to accelerate into 9 instead of slowing down the entire way through, the Camaro is actually beating the McLaren through this extremely high-speed decreasing radius corner. To me, that's where things get really interesting, because the McLaren should have all the advantage. It's lighter, and so that gives it an acceleration advantage. That should mean it's using its tires better. But if my memory serves right, the Camaro has way stickier tires, and probably, I don't want to be 100% sure on this, but it might have a little bit more in the way of aero going for it to hunker it down. And this would indicate that's the case, because the Camaro is cornering at 130 miles an hour, where the McLaren's cornering at 120. That 10 mile an hour difference between the two cars is going to make up for the difference in lap time, and that's going to account for the huge difference that we see pretty much everywhere else on the track. The McLaren is kind of trading blows, but because the Camaro was either more confidence-inspiring or simply had more grip through 8 and part of 9, it looks like, that's what ultimately made it faster. Now that's why we do this data analysis, because you have these two completely different cars. One's a lightweight, high-performance British exotic, and the Camaro is the Camaro, you know? And you see how they arrive at similar goals, but in very different ways. And it would seem that the biggest difference here, besides the McLaren's outright power to weight advantage, is the Camaro's stability and grip at high speed. Now, because this looks like a pretty flat corner, we can also turn on the lateral acceleration, and we see that both cars are pulling close to about 1.1, almost 1.2 G as they go through that corner. It looks like the Camaro is slightly higher at that speed. That tells me if Randy's going as fast as possible, we know he is, that tells me there might be an aero advantage or a tire advantage, probably a tire advantage most likely through that corner. Getting a little bit off track because I find this comparison fascinating, and as they get on back to the front straight, the McLaren again out-accelerates the Camaro to the finish line, even though the Camaro gets there sooner as we turn it back to time. And this is kind of the fun that we have when analyzing data after the fact. It's not just the, oh, this is the lap time that's fast. It's the, this is the lap time and here's why, which is always what I find most interesting about understanding vehicle dynamics and why cars perform the way they do. Let's explain and look at the reasons why one car might behave differently than the other. And these little curves tell you a lot about what's going on there. Now, when we get the data out of this, we back out this data and a bunch of other channels here, the lateral acceleration, longitudinal acceleration, the distance, the speed, all this stuff. I'm going to try to put on as many things here as possible just to make it look as confusing as hell. And we'll put all these ugly curves on a lap, export this into Excel, and then start crunching the stuff to make all the pretty graphics that you see on these videos and in the MotorTrend magazine. I hope this was exciting, interesting, entertaining. I hope it wasn't too boring. It's the stuff that I find completely fascinating about testing vehicles, and I hope you did too. If you have any questions or you want to see more of this stuff, email us, dailyfix@motortrend.com. And we'll see you on the next one. We'll do a burnout to compensate for all the nerding out we just did here. Here's what you missed last week on Daily Fix, exclusively on MotorTrend On Demand. That right there is the Audi RS7 Performance. It may look like a four-door sedan, but it's packing 605 horsepower. Oh my God, this thing is fast.
Look, I mean, who's to say what an appropriate acceleration time is?
I think literally us as car critics. Good Lord. I'm Carlos Lago, and if you didn't watch last week's Daily Fix, you should do that now. It's exclusive.